Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. I'm super excited to have back with me Joshua Townshend. And Joshua, I'm so glad you're here.
Always a delight. I just get all smiley just thinking about our conversation.
Me
so
too.
thank you, Becky.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And we've talked about a few different things that we can discuss today. And I would love to start with the one that's like feels very hot to me in terms of what's, the news, and that is AI. Should artificial intelligence be narrating our audiobooks? Yeah, that's going to be a good rabbit hole, I think, for us to jump into first. So
Sure.
I would love to hear initial thoughts, what comes up for you?
This isn't the first time we've been there. We've been through this before. And so what that looks like is with the advent of the movie industry and everyone leaving the West Coast as actors to come to Los Angeles to be in the movies, right?
Yeah.
So all the actors back then would be like, well, that's not real acting. Real acting is only on the stage.
Right. Yes.
And so then everyone came out to embrace the new technology. And then some actors from the stage could do it, and some actors from the stage could not do it. They could not make the transition. And these were silent movies. I want to be clear. This is not those newfangled speakies.
Right.
So when the actors were able, some actors did and some actors didn't. And the reason why some actors didn't, and it blows my mind to think about this, and I don't know if most people think about this, but there were people in the old school acting worlds of theater that would make whole careers, and when I say whole careers, I mean 30, 40, 50 years, playing Juliet in Romeo and Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
This lady would have the market on Juliet, and she played Juliet from the age, ingenue role, from the age of 18 until the age of 50.
Yeah. Yeah. I think probably most people aren't aware of that.
Yes. And so that's a huge, shift in terms of consciousness. Yeah. And so it's the same thing that's happening today. Same thing. It's the same transition. Some people will make it and some people won't. Then all those actors went to Hollywood and they started working in film, and then the talkies came out. And then again, the culling happened. A lot of actors couldn't make the transition because they didn't have a voice that was suitable for recording.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or they played the thug and they talk like this.
Right.
So it wouldn't, it's like,
so no one's going to believe
what are we
that.
going to do with that? Yeah, right. And that's why, John Wayne, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing that's happening again with this new technology. I just want people just to kind of chill and relax because it's not going to go away. But what we need to do is be able to focus on, okay, what's really happening here and how can this help me?
Interesting that because it feels like it's a little different in that we're not talking so much about actors shifting into a different role, or are we? Or as much as being sort of this now voice being replaced by machine.
Would you like fries with your order? So, right, that's a script.
Yeah.
That's a line of dialogue. Would you like fries with your order?
Yeah.
And so there is no question that kind of commerce, that kind of exchange, that kind of what I call data, you're looking at data transfer when you do that. So data transfer actors or acting or voiceover talent needs to be very concerned.
Right.
Because we will not need data transfer actors anymore.
Right.
In the same way, we will not need 50-year-old ladies to play Romeo and Juliet or Juliet and Romeo and Juliet. We just won't need it because now we have 18-year-old actors who need to look 18 because now we're in film.
Right.
There will be no oh, I just phoned it in. Do you remember that expression? They phoned it in?
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah.
Because the AI can do that better.
Right.
And cheaper and faster.
Right.
So what that tells me is that anyone who's doing this kind of work really needs to reevaluate, who am I? What do I want? What are my skills and talents? And do I want to dig into this deeper? There are two things that as of right now, as of this conversation, AI is not able to do. And it's uniquely human as of today. The subordinate image and irony or juxtaposition.
Great. Let's define those a little bit more for people.
Sure. Yeah. So the subordinate image is probably one of the most influential techniques or ways of work that an actor or someone who presents or performs material has at their fingertips. Because everybody has the same material for auditioning, to get one person a role over 50 people.
Right, yeah.
Everyone has the same words. Now, what subordinate image, what subordinate meaning under, image meaning the image that I have that I'm communicating from to get fancy, my third eye to your third eye, that I'm giving you an imprint that is indelible, that's part of a larger consciousness.
Yeah.
When I work at that level, the work I do, whether you hire me or not, is indelible.
Right. Yeah.
So when I say he drove the sports car fast, I need to be able to communicate to you that this was a red sports car without saying the word red.
Yeah.
That's an example, a very simple example of a subordinate image.
Right. And here's where we're really driving back in many ways to our first conversation where we were getting into the completeness of thought, or the completeness may not be the right word, but that we are not, while we are communicating with words, there is so much more that is happening in that context. Yes. And I see now where you're going with where we've been before, that we're moving from one place. Okay, now AI is, yes, fine. They can take over our GPS. They've already done that. It's fine. We're happy with that. Yes, they can take our orders. Can they? Can it? But only the people who are willing to get into that, truly coming to that place, the actor place, that in-depth story, full being place, and developing those skills are going to be the ones that are still doing the live narration. Yeah.
Yes, we don't need actors anymore for data transfer.
Yeah.
And in some ways, thank God.
Yeah.
Do you know? Yeah. Because it's like, okay, so I got that. And then another example, because I was listening to some AI narration, and I find it fascinating. Because especially when they get good, if they get good, then it's even more interesting for me. Because it's like, ooh, oh, there's the tell. Oh, there it is. It's that thing of like reading left to right. If you're still reading left to right as a voiceover talent, as an actor, you're going to be unemployable in about 2 minutes ago. Because the AI can do that. Anyone can do that, reading left to right. This whole thing of going to school and memorizing the words. Who cares about memorizing the words? So the other thing is juxtaposition or irony or intonation. It's sort of like if someone says a girl's out on a date and the line of dialogue is, I would never do that. The data is, I would never do that. I would never do that. And then if she's like somehow like romantically interested in the guy and she wants to infer that and she wants to tease him along, she might say, oh, I would never do that.
Yes.
Now, how is AI supposed to get that?
Yeah.
Today?
Yeah.
Today?
Yeah, I don't see how that can happen. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of subtlety of, interpretation.
Yes. And making it your own. Not even like from English lit or, Shakespeare or classical music where, musicians try to interpret the classics. It's like, this is about making it your own.
Yeah.
This is about doing your own deep dive and go, what's this really about? How does this touch me?
Yeah.
And it has to do with sense and sensibility and choices. Yeah. What was the other?
I was thinking about fiction and nonfiction, because this is sort of an interesting piece in relation to that. So in some ways, we could say that this data transfer, right? Much of nonfiction is this communication of information. there is a piece that I would love to hear your thoughts on, and that is I can listen to two different people, let's say. I'm not going to differentiate in this moment with AI. When I listen to two different people reading the same sentence, and one phrases it in such a way that I really get what the message is. And another one reads the same words, and whether it's the phrasing or just the slight stress on one word versus another word, I might have to stop and rethink the sentence or re-listen to it again to really get what the message is. I think of nonfiction as story as well. What are your thoughts around that piece?
It's the same thing that you're saying. It has to do with the subordinate image.
Yeah.
Because the person who's communicated something to you in a way that you could get it, that you could grok it, that you could get the aha moment, however you want to say it, has done that himself or herself. And the person who's just reading the words, it won't land.
Right.
I literally can't hear it. There's an old story that goes something like this. A young mother and her son travel for 7 days walking through the wilderness or whatever. They get to this master guru healer, and the lady goes, "My son's about to die. Tell us what's wrong." And he goes, "He's eating too much sugar." She goes, "What should we do?" He goes, "Come back in a week." She goes, "But it took us 5 days to get here." He goes, "Come back in a week." They go halfway home, they rest there, and they walk back another halfway. They come back into his company, and he looks at the little boy and he goes, "Stop eating sugar." And the mom goes, What the hell was that? You made us wait a whole week. We had to do why couldn't you just tell him last week? He goes, "Last week, I was eating sugar."
Yeah. There's something that also I want to sort of look at from the side, in reading these articles, some of these articles about, this great thing that's happening. AI is going to start doing audiobooks, rah, rah, rah. Here's why, is because now we're going to create 1 million audiobooks in the next few years. And I read that and I think, to what end? Why is that? Why is that important? The reason I bring it up is because it feels like, just like AI, there is a soul component missing. There is the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we creating these stories in the first place? Why are we bringing them to life in audio? And there was also a comment about position, and it's written clearly, the one article I'm referring to is clearly written, directed to authors, not directed to listeners, but directed to authors, about positioning authors to win readers in the marketplace. And I'm thinking, from my perspective, it is not about winning readers. It is about connecting the material that has been lovingly, carefully, generated, created, this creation, and connecting it with the people that are going to benefit from that, who are looking for that material, whether it's entertainment or information or whatever it is. And that's the way I perceive marketing, is that it's about people finding each other. The material has been written, finding its audience. But there's something about the drive that it's all going to be better because it will be cheaper, and therefore then we can do more of it. It just, again, sort of feels like all the soul has just been drained out of that, and we are being left with kind of empty words. I mean, even that phrase, empty words, we most often associate that with when somebody says something and they don't mean it, right? How do we react to that? Usually pretty badly. And I feel like there is this whole soul piece. Soul feels like the best word that I can use, come up with to encapsulate in words this deeper experience. That taking that out of our stories that we are, because I also come from that place of we are story, we are living story, we live as story, we think of our lives in story, right, in narrative. It's all, and then to lose the soul of that just sounds so tragic. And I love what you said early on, that it's not, that you don't see it as that we're going to be losing that, but that we are undergoing this shift into separating out, I guess, some will rise to the occasion, to the work that is being done, and others not.
The great culling, yeah. The white zone is for the immediate loading of passengers only. No parking, right? It's like, gosh, who got that job? God, great gig. It makes it sound so fresh and alive. I want that.
Yeah.
The white zone. And, you just said something so eloquent. You said something like, empty words, and people say things that they don't mean. And how does that feel to me when I hear that? And yet at the same time, there's going to be a generation coming up in about 5 to 10 years that will hear a lot of that. And how will that hardwire them in a different way? Mm-hmm. And what does it mean to get attention from AI?
Yeah.
What does it mean to have a conversation with AI? Are we that predictable? Part of what's happening with AI, especially in the writing world as well, is that they can only reference, AI can only reference that which is written already. Sure, 1,600 years of writing or whatever they're pulling from. But it starts with that consciousness of the original writer. So if we want to put something new into the system, it'll take years, because it's still going to be pulling from old school stuff. Old school meaning, stuff that happened 6 months ago.
Way back then. Yeah. Yeah.
Way back 6 months ago.
Yeah. I was thinking about this in terms of children's books especially. And then I just now as you're talking about that communication with AI, I don't know if you've seen the Umbrella Academy, but there's a robot mother that is in that story. But the idea of an AI voice reading a children's story is very unnerving to me because of that very, the missing soul piece. And how critical I think it is. I think of, if we just touch on children's books for a moment, there's so many benefits of kids listening to audiobooks. Everything from, the fact that some parents don't feel comfortable reading out loud to their kids. And yet, it's so valuable for them to be hearing story read to them. Everything from reading fluency to, just kind of learning about the world. But yeah, if that were to be turned over to a voice that wasn't carrying all that internal message, the images, the feelings, that would be terribly sad.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think anybody would want that for anyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can mask it by saying, oh, no, we'll be able to customize it with the child's name in it. You don't understand. Jack will be,
yeah,
I don't know, Bobby or whatever, because Bobby's his name, right? But it's like,
right.
No, it's not just about pronouns here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I feel the heaviness right now, and it's so interesting because we have, as artists, I'm just going to say we're all artists here. As artists, we have to work with what's in front of us. We don't have an option. And so if this is what's in front of us, that means that we need to work with it in such a way that's going to be of benefit to us. I work on my computer. My computer does not work on me. And I think it's fantastic that we're getting away from this idea that the best writer is the one who knows how to spell words and punctuation.
Another thing that computers are actually really good at. Let's let them worry about the spell check and the punctuation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we start to put our attention, our consciousness, our awareness on the very thing that's really going to be of benefit. No matter how good AI gets, someone has to come up with the prompt. Someone has to come up with the idea.
Come back to my comment about the editing thing, is that editors are still going to be really important, human editors, because it's not all about spelling and punctuation in terms of getting to a manuscript that is telling the story in the very best way that it can be told, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just gonna get better and richer, and we're actually going to be more able to spend more time really massaging those areas that are uniquely human. The area of concern that I hear from you and that I hear from others is this thing of creating basically two classes, and that's going to be
I do feel like
not
there
something
is
fun to witness.
I mean, in a sense, yes, I get that it's trying to solve this problem perceived as a problem. What is perceived as a problem is that audiobook narration production is expensive. I get that. And so right now we have those that can afford to do it, to go forward in that world, and those that can't.
I disagree
Go ahead.
that it's expensive.
Jump right in.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Yeah.
We'll have a conversation around that. The amount of people that you're reaching with audiobook is insane. Is insane. And there are people that you can listen to today that A, are no longer alive, and B, that there's no way you would have that conversation with them 20 years ago because you would never be in proximity to hear them, not only their words, but actually to hear them speak, and improvisationally perhaps, or about the creating of that book. So from that perspective, audio production is insanely inexpensive. The potential of the reach and the what's the word? How long the shelf life is like. Yeah. It's amazing. And, they say in the beginning, I read the same article you were referencing to earlier, and they say, oh, well, the author's going to get 75% and production's going to get 25 or whatever the split was. And I was like, does anyone remember how in the beginning of most technology, it's really inexpensive and then it gets more and more expensive because where else are you going to go? You have nowhere else to go. And then all of a sudden it becomes more. Or have you ever noticed like when the airline started charging baggage fees just for a little while to take care of fuel costs, they never went away? It's the same thing. It's like as soon as they get the toe in the market, they're going to be like, well, it's a little, operating costs are higher than we thought, so we're going to have to do a 65-35 split. Well, things have come up and now it's 50-50. You know how expensive these machines are.
The other thing that have found disturbing about the articles I've been reading about this is how now that we're like audiobook production or audiobooks, the double-digit growth for over a decade now has gotten so many people's attention who can see profit in that lots of people are jumping in to get a piece of the pie, right? To find their place. And I'm not opposed to people doing what they're passionate about I'm all for that, 100%. It feels like there's more focus on the profit consumerism approach to what's to what I'm reading, and the people who are like coming up with these solutions that are not really solutions, as they are a different way for them to earn a profit. And that concerns me. I feel like, hey, remember, there's something much big. It's, before we know it, we can get a machine to paint that Rembrandt. We figured out how to put paintbrushes in little hands and to have it follow a paint by number, and it's going to be just as good. Really? Do we really believe that's going to be just as good? So I feel like we're sort of in that similar realm to what that might look like.
Yeah, and it won't be, and it can't be, and it has to do with the larger things. Like, for instance, does Chipotle really make the best Mexican food?
Not in my world.
And I feel like most people would agree that no one is expecting Chipotle to make the best Mexican food you've ever had, period. Yeah. Bar none. And yet they make a lot of money. Does McDonald's really serve the best possible hamburger? No, and not even close. And everyone knows it. They're not expecting it, but what they get, what you expect, you get for that $1.99 or $5.99 or whatever. And so, I feel like we really need to make a distinction between, availability, proximity, cost, fees, et cetera, as to what you actually get for that experience. And it's a different experience. And some people will value that, this more auteur, customized experience, and some people don't. And I was thinking about, because I thought about this conversation, and it's like, there are certain kinds of books, like books about how to fix your computer. Maybe that's really great for AI. Someone writes that script, or AI writes the script. How to fix me. And then AI, records it. We're done. Yeah, how to fix me. There you go. Do you know? And maybe that's perfect, and maybe that's all the person needs. Step one, take the tool out of the bag.
It'll be
Step
interesting.
two.
See what happens. Let's pause for a moment. We'll be right back.
Frustrated by the royalty rates for your audiobook? Annoyed that when the digital distributors say 70%, they actually mean 70% of 50% or 80% of 70%, neither of which is an actual 70%. Wishing there was a way to cut out, or at least shrink, the middleman. Yet, you want your audiobook listeners to have a smooth and positive experience, and a direct download sale from your website won't deliver that. Pro Audio Voices hears you. Out of our commitment to our author clients, we've created Amplify, a program that provides an actual 65% royalties of the price you set, that gives you access to your customers' names and emails so you can reconnect with them, and keeps you in the driver's seat. Check it out at proaudiovoices.com in the marketing menu.
Let's talk a little bit about this adjusting material that that's written as literature, so to performance script, so lit to script for performance.
Okay, good call. So I was hanging out with my 11-and-a-half-year-old nephew, and I was telling him about, because he's interested in circus skills and whatnot, and I said, there's a guy named Buster Keaton. Never heard of him. So I said, great. And I said, he's done some of the most amazing things. He's an unsung hero in the silent film era. Charlie Chaplin was better known, Laurel and Hardy, etc. So because of that, we were watching that, and then Charlie Chaplin came on. I said, oh, did you ever see The Gold Rush? And so he didn't know who Charlie Chaplin was. So we watched a little bit of The Gold Rush. Charlie Chaplin, who I respect as an amazing actor, writer, producer, cinematographer, composer, brilliant, beyond Academy Award winning, genius. He had done The Gold Rush as a silent movie, and later he did another release of it where he spoke some of the lines of dialogue as if they had dialogue. He superimposed his, laid a vocal track on it with literary reference, meaning, and he said, and the old man said, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my God, I love Charlie Chaplin, but he made a fatal mistake.
Yeah.
Because that was the reference that he had in 1940 or 30 or whenever he recorded that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he played all the parts, by the way.
Yeah.
His voice was all the parts, as well as the narrator.
I don't know that I ever saw the remake with I'll have to check that out. Yeah. Yeah,
it's on YouTube. It was just an interesting, we just sort of, tripped over it. But the reason why I mention that is because someone who is as an amazing, full, complete, astounding artist like Charlie Chaplin made the faux pas of including, said the old man.
Right.
And it's redundant. We're seeing it that it comes out of the old man's mouth. We are seeing it that it comes out of the grizzly man, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing as what you're asking me. It's the same thing. So when you go from something that's read to something that is performed, either auditorily or on a screen, there are certain things that need to be in place in the literary form that are no longer of service in the performance. And those, I'm talking about basic now, that has to be weeded out. And if you keep doing that, what you're doing is you're taking your audience out of that narrative in that form.
Yeah. One of the things that we...
So that's at the most basic level.
We typically do when we're doing a full cast production, because then we have distinct voices playing their many roles. But it can be tricky even then, because we are relying on different cues for the listener to remember the voice is connected with which personality. But there are some very simple ways to make that clear who's speaking without using the who said, the attribution. It can be, Kitty shifted in her seat. And then we hear her say the thing. Or Paul looked livid.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then we hear that,
Billy inhales slowly. Yeah, giving them in my world, I call that the physical action. So you give them a physical action, which then puts our attention back to them.
It really makes a huge difference than having to go with the so-and-so said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're also adding in a layer. You're also adding a layer of contemplation or fear or doubt or hopes and dreams or fears and secrets. You're adding in another, because now we're talking about in the world of auditory, but you're adding in another layer of their psychology and what's going on in their inner life. So that's great.
Are there other things that you sort of would highlight in the sort of lit to script question, sort of in that realm, if somebody comes to you with a script?
Yeah, so it depends upon the medium. So if we're dealing in a very specific medium like auditory only, then like one thing I'm thinking of right now, just as a for instance, if someone is doing a scene in a cafe, I would add in an auditory track of like murmurs in the background, plates being shuffled, et cetera, et cetera.
That atmospheric sound effect is so helpful. It sort of keeps us in the place where we sort of anchoring the place subtly, without having to make lots of commentary about it. Yeah.
Yeah, actually no commentary, just as it is, and let it speak for itself. And then you can actually pull focus on that as you will. So, maybe it helps when the big reveal happens in the scene, that everything goes quiet.
Silence is so powerful. I know.
Yeah,
it's like we wouldn't listen to music without rests. We need them. They are...
That's right.
They are part of context. They are part of the expression. So let's go a little deeper there into sort of allowing breathing room for these. Yeah,
so there's two ways to do most things in life, but there's technical and then there's intuitive. But so, even in the music world, they call it scoring. You score. And it's not as fashionable right now, but, people score a script, especially directors and producers. They'll go in and score it, meaning they'll put in the rests. Well, hopefully you have sensitive and aware talent and they can feel it as well. But yeah, you either do it technically or it happens organically, but there is the building up, and then the disassembling or the fall. And then, that's where the editor comes through, and then the audio editor comes through and you can really point it up. I mean, you can put you could put a siren in the background, a wailing siren, where someone, there are birds chirping. There's so many things, but that's based on place. But it's so important to have your palette available.
Oh, we're talking about breathing space in to create those moments, the rests in the rests in the score. I mean, I think about, just on the most basic level, that every manuscript, that paragraph breaks are a helpful indication. They're sort of the rests that the author has put in place without maybe even knowing that they have. But they are a way where we're going to just take a moment, and it might be a second, and then we're going to just slightly shift. So each one is a build on the next, and that now not every time. Certainly there are in our let's say in dialogue where we go, from one to another. That's a conversation where we may or may not, depending on what's going on internally, have moments between. They might be right on top of each other. They might be literally on top of each other. That there are indicators in the manuscript typically as a starting place with paragraphs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's indicators in life as well.
Great.
Okay. Let me put it into a script format. In a script format, an inexperienced writer will say something like, okay, well, thank you for the meeting. We had a wonderful time, right? Or a script writer will say at the end of a date, like, well, that was really nice to meet you. Thank you for our first date. I have to go now. Yeah. Okay. So someone more sophisticated will go, they'll finish up the meal or whatever. and they'll pick up their keys and they'll go, so
Yes.
what else you got planned for today?
Yeah.
Very different, but accomplishes the same thing.
Yes.
And I'm working with a completely different subordinate image.
The first, just using the words, it's interesting that by providing the words that are saying the thing that is the subordinate image, in other words, trying to do it all in text, right? Not that there isn't still a subordinate image, because there still needs to be, but that the text is trying to accomplish all of that. And I find that this is a really interesting thing in terms of the writing process itself, right? Is like, how are we saying the things? Is each person actually saying all those words that indicate that we are about to say goodbye to each other? Yeah, not usually. More interesting that they pick up their keys and then ask that question, because we get it. We get it in a whole different way. Yeah.
Because the inner life is happening. See, it goes back to the thing of I can read the words left to right and be a technician, or I can actually have the inner life of the character, and those actions and those words and those behaviors start to come out spontaneously. I don't even have to think about it. Or you can do it on a technical level and score it and go, okay, on this moment, I need you to da-da-da-da-da. And, both are okay.
Yeah.
It's just how much more fun to get
Or
to
she
it.
looked at her watch and asked.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many ways to.
This is my reveal, I guess. Sharing maybe a little too much, but I actually do that in real life now, because I watch myself and I also watch the other person for their maybe conscious or maybe unconscious indicators that our conversation is over. Okay, you ready for this? Okay, I'm going to give an assignment for anyone listening, because I love doing this. It's so much fun, and that is this. Okay, let me ask you, Becky. When a conversation ends, or when you're end of a meeting or end of a conversation, in a non-personal environment, in a non-personal relationship, just want to be clear. Okay. Do you end the meeting, or does the other person end the meeting or the conversation?
It's definitely a mix in my life. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's the other person.
And which do you prefer?
I think so. Yeah.
You prefer it when you end it?
I think so. I have to really think about that. I don't think I've taken the time to really think about that. I guess in some ways, like when the other person ends it, I don't think I have. I'm not sure if I'm answering accurately. I feel like I have to really think about there. There are times when it just feels so clear that we're both like wrapping it up, and then often I will sort of put the capper on it that just like allows it to end. Yes.
Okay. So that's how you end most non-personal meetings or conversations. Would you say that?
I can't say. I'm going to have to like spend some time observing myself more. Yeah.
It's a very interesting conversation. So some people are very comfortable letting the other person end the conversation. Like they feel more comfortable when someone else like says, well, I love that one at meetings when someone behind a desk goes, well, and they kind of like go like that. And I on the inside, I smile so big. It's like, okay. So there's that. And then, so there's people who like to have the other person end it. And then there's other people who like to end it. So we have people who like to let the other person end it. And so my advocation is for once you identify which one you prefer, which one is more natural to you. I haven't met the person who didn't have a natural leaning towards one or the other, to do the opposite. And in that is a huge growth opportunity.
When you say that, it makes me think, like, I think I could have several years ago, I could have easily answered that question, that my tendency would be to have the other person end it, and that I've much more leaned into being able to end it myself, or being, sort of that when I feel like we're done, I'm really comfortable with asking the question, okay, is there anything else? Have we got it covered? We good? Kind of like checking in, maybe, or, depending on the conversation, obviously, there's so many variables, but interesting. I'm going to have to observe myself more now.
Oh, it's such an interesting road to go down, because to do the opposite will bring up certain things that are really important. And then when you go back to your, the way that is more natural to you. And by the way, my personal feeling for our conversations is they're always like this amazing amount of flow, even towards the end of the conversation. But I've given this assignment to a lot of people that I work with, and they come back to me and they tell me, they go, oh my God, it was so uncomfortable for me letting the other person end the conversation. I couldn't wait. I was jumping out of my skin. They took forever. Because what happens is mostly when people have long conversations, you have the pair of the opposites. So now you're making the person who's not comfortable ending conversations having to end the conversation.
Which is going to take a really long time because they're not used to it or comfortable with it. Yeah.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
It's a great life.
That's great. We are going to have to wrap up, but I'm sorry.
Oh, it was so easy for you. Oh my God, Becky, you changed. Well, it's time for us to go now.
I actually have to jump into a recording
session. You didn't even ask me if there's any more questions. You're like, no, that's it. It's over.
Oh, sorry.
Done.
However, I really want to have you back on, and
I hope so.
Continue these conversations. This has been so fun. So
the best.
Oh my gosh. There are so many more places we're going to go. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
All right.
Best time. Okay. All right. Blessings.
Bye for now. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.